Welcome into the show, guys. We are ecstatic to say Rockets get a huge win in Denver, 115 to 101. This was round two, really round three for the season, but round two in Denver. Rockets had just played there on Monday and lost a tough one in overtime. This was a completely different Rockets team than what we saw in that Monday game. And it was a completely different shift in a variety of ways. Kind of fascinating. I'm here with Ben DuBose of Rockets Wire on USA Today and ClutchFans. And Ben, there's a lot to digest here. Obviously we're going to talk a lot about Reed Sheppard, Kevin Durant, and Jabari Smith Jr. that really had terrific games tonight.
Yeah, and I want to start with Kevin Durant. Well, Kevin Durant and Ime Udoka, but I think inherently the player is a little more important because, look, there's some potentially bigger picture takeaways with regards to how the Rockets should run their offense and their defense, and this was their first big boy win against a true top-tier team this season. There had been a lot made of, the fact that they were 0-5 against the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Spurs, the Pistons. So yeah, it could have some implications for down the road when we talk about playoff basketball. But before we talk about April, we've got to talk about December. We've got to talk about where we are right now. And this was the first patch of adversity that the Rockets had really hit this season. Like, these last two games were the first time the Rockets had lost consecutive games since their 0-2 start to the year. And the way they lost in New Orleans, as frustrating as it was to blow a 25-point lead in the second half, they were upset post-game. You could look at Kevin Durant's post-game interview, and the tension was palpable. He was angry, and I don't think it's all necessarily his teammates. Some of it, he's angry at himself. He's frustrated by the situation. But the question is always, how do you respond when you get punched in the mouth, when you hit that level of adversity? We heard Ime call them out in New Orleans, call their defensive effort embarrassing.
Yeah.
And boy, did they respond tonight, Dave. So the Nuggets average 126 points per game. This was their lowest scoring game of the year. But I think you can almost throw out the fourth quarter because over half of it was garbage time with the Rockets up 20-plus points midway through. Like, the first three quarters, they held the Nuggets to 66 points. And even with that fourth quarter where the Nuggets put up 35, largely in garbage time, it was still easily their lowest scoring game of the season. So the Rockets responded defensively with regards to their intensity. I thought Josh Okogie deserves a shout-out early in the game. The threes he hit, a couple of steals that he had in the first half, the transition play, that sort of sparked the Rockets after they were a little bit lethargic. But I just think in a situation like this, it comes down to your leaders, your alphas. On the court, that's Kevin Durant. On the sidelines, that's Ime Udoka. And so the Rockets, the other guys on that team, they got called out. I think in the first quarter, it was pretty clear that Kevin Durant was taking this game much more seriously than one of 82. And he acknowledged it in his postgame interview with Vanessa Richardson, talking about how they brought more juice, more energy. There was a play in the first quarter where you could see Kevin was visibly frustrated with Amen Thompson for not going where he wanted him to go on the floor. And so it's always useful to see, how does your team respond, especially when so many of your rotation guys are young, when they get called out. And so Ime postgame in New Orleans, Kevin to an extent postgame, and early on tonight, you could see that there was an edge. There was something extra. This was not a game that the Rockets wanted to lose. And so how did they respond collectively? I think it's just really important to start there because we mentioned the other night they entered 3-4 in December. It wasn't just the last couple of games. They hadn't really been themselves. It felt like since the calendar turned to December, today they were. This was a game they led for, I'd say, 75, 80% of it, largely by 10-plus points. And so to see them respond to that level of adversity, getting called out by Ime Udoka and to an extent by Kevin Durant, and respond the way they did, like, first and foremost, kudos to KD and Reed Sheppard and Jabari Smith Jr. for hitting a lot of tough shots tonight. But I think it starts just culturally. And so seeing how they responded up and down that roster, Alperen Sengun didn't have a big statistical game, but I thought his defense was much improved tonight, Dave, much improved. And I think a lot of that just comes down to seeing how your team responds to those call-outs. Dave, they responded tonight. In the short term, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was so fun. I tweeted this. It's just so fun to watch this team be kind of that Ime Udoka identity where it's strong defense, and then to be an efficient three-point shooting team, which has escaped them before this season. But now tonight they had increased volume, But it really I mean, and as far as Şengün, I agree with you. I thought really less is more. He took 27 shots in the last game, and it was close. Today he just took a step back as far as the offense and let these guys go to work on the outside. And I mean, it's a little bit of an outlier performance. Obviously, the Rockets were 19 of 35 from three-point range, which is scorching. KD was 5 of 6. We're going to talk about Reed Sheppard, who was definitely the story of the game, and Jabari was 5 of 11. I think those guys combined for 16 triples. But at the same time, like, it's just nice to see Şengün play that kind of a game where he's just willing to distribute or kind of take a step back. People criticized him after the Pelicans game, and I think this was good to see. But what's amazing, like you said, is the defense. They held the Nuggets today to 27% three-point shooting. This is the second best from efficiency standpoint three-point shooting team in the league.
And only 29 attempts. Let's emphasize that. And 22 in the first 3 quarters. So it's not just that the Nuggets missed those shots. The Rockets aggressively defended and closed out and made it difficult for them to get off shots, period.
Yeah, that was huge. And I think 125 points they average per game. Rockets held them as you mentioned, 101 today. I mean, it's just terrific to see because we were watching, at least I was watching this in the first quarter thinking the Rockets just aren't as good as the Nuggets, period. But it, obviously shifted on a dime, and the Rockets, let's start with Reed Sheppard. Kevin Durant was amazing. We're going to talk about Kevin Durant for sure. We'll talk as well about Jabari, the kind of game he had. But Reed Sheppard now is just shifting the dialogue. It's to the point now where you can't really worry about the defense. You can't really worry about these other things. He's looking like a potential engine. Like I don't say that lightly. At the same time, I don't want to say that that's for sure. But he's made some great passes. But today he was just launching. This was the game. This was Reed Sheppard against the Golden State Warriors. The cocaine curry Reed Sheppard just going nuts, pulling up from 5 to 10 feet behind 3-point line. And just made some amazing shots, the kind that your jaw's on the floor. I think you got to play him now. I don't know if it's start, but at a minimum, you got to crank up the minutes every single game.
Yeah, and I think if it's late and close the way it was the other night in New Orleans, it's getting to where it's very difficult to justify leaving him on the sidelines. And I think for all the talk that's been out there the last few days, and I thought it was somewhat overcooked after that Monday loss because obviously there's an asterisk you put on that with the officiating. Overall, the Rockets actually, at least in the fourth quarter, executed really well offensively down the stretch in that game. But it was Reed Sheppard that sparked them. He was the guy that hit a couple of big threes, that was running the offense for stretches. And when you look at these big games that they've had against the top tier, excluding the first 2, when I think he clearly wasn't ready, needed a little bit of seasoning. Ever since that Spurs Cup game, start with the San Antonio one, and then you look at these 3 against Denver. So 2 of them, he was lights out. Today and the first game against Denver, he was probably your best player over those 2 games. Now, I think today, Kevin was probably a little bit better overall, but I'd say for the 2 games, the home Cup game and the one tonight, Reed was probably a little bit better because if you recall, Kevin struggled in that home game against the Nuggets. And then the other night, Reed had a bad first half. I think he started 0 of 6, but from midway through that game and in the super high leverage moments, he stepped up. He delivered. Mm-hmm. And so I think against really good teams, you're disproportionately likely to be in close games against. The Rockets were good enough today not to really be pushed, but in most of these games, you can't expect to beat a team like the Nuggets, especially on the road, by like 15 plus points to where there's not even relevant possessions in the fourth quarter. And I just think that his combination of shot making and shot creation is so important because the big question for this Rockets team, Kevin Durant, even at 37, he's still Kevin Durant. We've covered that. But what's going to happen when teams send that second defender, or if it's a game where refs let it be a little chippy, they have some long defenders that can get away with some physicality, where do the Rockets turn if Kevin Durant isn't able to initiate offense when it matters most? And Şengün and Ime have had moments this season, especially Şengün, but against the top tier, it hasn't been as consistent as you like. And so I think having Reed out there as a third guy that can really create and shoot at a high level, I think that's just so important. And obviously there are questions with regards to the defense. We saw Jamal Murray hunt him a few times on switches in the second half. But the thing is, Dave, For the season as a whole, I looked it up. Reed Sheppard is tied going into today for the second best defensive rating on the team, or second lowest,
Yeah.
So that can certainly be misleading, but what I do think it speaks to is that the Rockets are not getting torched defensively when he's on the court. It's not like every time he goes on there that the Rockets are just getting run out of the gym and that it's just a layup line. That's not happening. Now, am I saying Reed Sheppard is the second best defensive player? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that when the overall performance is still passable, it shows you that the Rockets are able to scheme around it. It shows you that that Reed's turnovers are able to make an impact and sort of offset some of those lowlights. Ime Udoka is a really creative coach, and you're sort of letting him shine. It's not easy asking an undersized 21-year-old to play high leverage minutes and, stop guys like Jamal Murray, but maybe Ime Udoka is the perfect coach for this. And when you look at the balance of the season, the defense is really not slipping in those Reed Sheppard minutes to the extent that you would think if you just look at him and you look at the scouting reports. So with that said, if Reed's not getting torched defensively, and we can clearly see what he does offensively and disproportionately against the better teams, look what he's done these 3 games against the Nuggets, the Spurs Cup game. If the defense is passable, and it has been, I don't know what the justification is for leaving him on the sidelines late in a close game. To me, it's not even so much about the point guard thing anymore. It's just about the shot making and the shot creation. It's so valuable. And we talked about the math. The Rockets got up 35 threes tonight to 29 for the Nuggets. That was a weakness for this team earlier in the year, losing the math advantage. Well, it's sort of tough to lose the math advantage where you can turn Reed loose and, he goes 6 of 9 from 3.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, Ben. I don't want to speak for you. I'm just going to keep it real. I look at San Antonio and OKC, and I've mentioned a little bit of this on the show before, but I'm just being honest here. I worry a little bit about that, that core the Rockets have. They're very good. I think they're very close, but I look at San Antonio, it looks really good. I look at OKC, they're young. It looks really good. I think Reed to me is the X factor on whether the Rockets are as good or better than those teams. Like, I really feel that way. Like, that's what I think. There's a special offensive player in here for sure. I mean, he's going to be, I'm sure, a little streaky here and there, but honest to goodness, it just like the Golden State game tonight looked very Curry-like. I mean, there was that play where, you remember, where Jabari was in the corner and they messed up the spacing and Reed was there too. And I think it was in transition, had kicked it out. And he just caught it all in one motion, launched that thing, and he'd already hit one just before that. And I'm just like, this guy is pulling another Curry moment. He has that potential. I'm not saying he's Steph Curry. I'm not saying that's for sure what he's going to become. But this kind of game reminds me of Steph a lot. So I think that, to me, he is such an important player as far as how good this team can be. I think Şengün, Jabari, Amen, really good core. Tari, which we haven't even seen yet, really good core. I'm not sure how it grades out compared to some of those others, but when you add Reed in there, I think it's what he could be. I think it's potentially great.
And I think it can also help Şengün and Amen in their development by alleviating some of the pressure. I think for this particular season, so much of it's going to come down to, yay, we figured out the volume. There we go.
It's my fault, guys. Yeah, it's mine. We got it fixed.
That's the biggest win of all. No, getting back to Reed, and not just what he means individually, but I think for the team overall, I think where this season is going to get decided, we can see this from a mile away. Kevin Durant is still KD. He commands a ridiculous amount of respect, especially in late game situations. And what's going to happen when opposing defenses decide that they aren't going to let KD beat them? And we've seen at times Şengün and Amen, especially Şengün, step up, but it's been, not as consistent as you would like. And that's to be expected. These guys are 22 and 23 years old. And asking them to be, the second and third best players on a bona fide championship contender, it's a lot. Like, they are both still developing as players. And so if you put Reed into that mix, I'm not saying Reed is necessarily going to be a better player than either of them, but just as another offensive engine, it can really alleviate the pressure. Whereas so much of it feels like has to be Şengün or Amen, And if they're struggling and they're having a bad night, then it just spirals because other teams are going to commit even more resources to KD. And so I think for this particular team, this isn't meant to, wave the white flag on Şengün or Amen as a bona fide number 2 and a contender. Absolutely not. No, but I do think, we've seen a little bit this month. There was one narrative I never bought into. There was this talk when people were doing their quarter season reviews when the Rockets had that hiatus at about the 20 game mark a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
People were asking, is KD or Alpi the best player on the team? Let's not get carried away. It's Kevin Durant.
Yes,
Alpi is doing a lot of really good things statistically, and he's still a very valuable player. But a lot of the numbers he puts up are due to the extraordinary attention that Kevin Durant draws. And that's why, especially in high leverage situations late in games, there's a reason opposing coaches are committing so many resources to KD. And so it's going to come down to how your non-KD players, what can they do in the half court late in close games? And there have been moments for Şengün and Amen, but is it enough to beat, the Oklahoma City Thunder 4 times out of 7 or other good teams like the Nuggets and Spurs that don't seem far behind them? That's the question. I'm not saying they can't, but I would feel a lot better about it if you also add Reed to that formula. For me, I guess the way I would bring it full circle, whatever defensive downgrade there is from playing Reed Sheppard in your closing lineup, to me, it is far less important. I will gladly take that trade-off in exchange for having a third creator out there alongside Şengün and Amen to alleviate that pressure in those scenarios where KD gets doubled. To me, I can see it from a mile away, Dave. The season's going to be determined by, in the playoffs, KD draws that double. He draws those physical defenses. What do the other 4 players do? And I don't see how you can't feel better if Reed Sheppard is one of those other 4 players.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had a couple of moments tonight. His patented sort of strip as they're bringing the ball up and go the other way, including one that kind of, I don't want to say the Nuggets were totally challenging at the very end, but they did put a little scare into the Rockets, and he kind of iced the game with a steal and dunk going the other way. 2 moments, you kind of alluded to them. One of them was the Bruce Brown blocking Reed Sheppard off a baseline jumper, and Bruce Brown barked at him and got in his face, really got up in his face, because I'm sure he was very frustrated. Reed had just been cooking all night long, and Reed just got right back at him and just yelled at him. Loved that moment. The other was mentioned here in the chat as well about the KD finger point, the little dance running back after he nailed that shot. That was beautiful too. You could see the full, KD Twitter troll come out in him in that moment. And I'm sure it's going to go viral in a bunch of ways tonight. But yeah, it just was fun to watch. Those 2 were amazing. They were definitely the 2 stars. There was a third that was pretty darn close. I thought he was really good both ends of the floor, and that's Jabari Smith Jr. tonight. After a total dud of a game in New Orleans against the Pelicans, where, he and Şengün were kind of the guys that were, the dogs, so to speak, in that game. Jabari just really bounced back in a big way tonight, hit 5 triples. He just looked really good on both ends of the floor. I don't know what your thoughts were on Jabari tonight.
Yeah, I thought he looked really, really good. And I thought there was a nice tweet from Matt Moore, HP Basketball on Twitter, talking early in the game about Rockets Twitter being too low on Jabari Smith Jr. and not realizing his value as a connector. I just think it's so easy for those secondary pieces around the stars. They're going to catch so much criticism because nobody wants to single out. I got to do it in the mirror a few times before I do it on YouTube. I'll mess that up. But I think it's very easy to sort of blame the ancillary pieces, which Jabari Smith Jr. is, because we all want to give, Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün are all-stars for a reason. And we think Amen Thompson has all-star potential. And so it's easy to give guys like that the benefit of the doubt. Maybe not Amen because he hasn't gotten to the all-star level yet, and he certainly got his share of criticism too. But the point is, there's sort of a sliding scale in that, the longer your resume is, the more likely you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. And even if you have a bad night, people sort of look the other way. And if you don't have that long resume, and even if you are providing a lot of value, and there's a reason why both Fred and KD on Fred's podcast that they taped this week went out of their way to talk about Jabari being so important to this team and having grown so much the last few months under KD's tutelage, there's a reason they're saying those things. They see it. But in a situation where the game's getting away from you, you have a couple of losses, and if Jabari has a cold shooting night, it's very easy for him to be piled on, for everyone to just sort of put all their frustrations in that bucket, because it's less convenient for us to call out the big guns who we do believe in and we think they're going to turn it around, and they probably will. But the team's probably going to turn it around as well. I mean, they're 17-8 through 25 games for a reason. Even with this month being underwhelming, they're still in a very good place in the West. And so, yeah, Jabari is just in a tough spot. Like, it's so difficult. It's funny, they're playing Denver tonight. It reminds me a little bit of before the year. I thought it was so silly that people were saying that Cam Johnson would be a clear upgrade over Michael Porter Jr. Like, I'm not saying he's been bad, but look what MPJ has been doing in Brooklyn. He looks really good. What happens is that when you're in that third or fourth banana roll on a contender alongside Jokic and Murray, it's so easy for any MPJ bad night to get blown out of proportion, for him to be the whipping boy, especially in social media and message board culture. And I think to some extent, that's the role. Not saying Jabari is exactly like MPJ as a player, but I think just in terms of the hierarchy of this team, that's sort of how he fits in. And so if he has a cold shooting night, especially if he shoots a lot in volume, people are going to pile on. But when you look a little bit deeper, yeah, he's still making a clear impact. And defensively, I know people have been frustrated this month. I still contend he's been moving on the perimeter much better this season than he did last season. I think you can see the work he did on his body paying off. And I just think tonight it was more the rest of the roster, and it starts with the interior. You know, the matchups earlier this week, we talked about Şengün's defensive struggles in recent games. Steven Adams had 0 rebounds the first game against the Nuggets a few nights ago.
Yeah.
The rim protection was a lot better tonight. And when the rim protection is better, when those centers are defending the way they're capable of, then I think the perimeter pieces like Jabari are inherently going to look a lot better.
Yeah, he had a great block on Valanciunas tonight, which was really nice. There was another drive.
Huge 5-point swing there. Yeah, there was a dunk that Jabari blocked, and then he hit a 3 on the other end. I think it would have been 7, and instead it was 12. I want to say midway through the third quarter. Not sure if that's the one you're referencing, but it was a huge momentum swing in the game, and Jabari had both the block and the 3.
Yeah. We joked before the season started with Jalen Green gone, who was going to be the sort of scapegoat of the year. I think Jalen and Fred got that talk a lot last year. I put all my money on Jabari. That hasn't really been the case, but I definitely saw that after the last game. I saw a lot of trade Jabari, a lot of stuff like that. I totally agree with what Matt's saying. I think Rockets Twitter, unfortunately, a lot of it, and I know there's a lot of great fans there too, but a lot of it is what they're now calling PRA, which is just points, rebounds, assists, is did you fill up the box score, as opposed to are you impacting winning? And I think what's amazing, I don't think I can say this as much about Jabari in previous years. It was starting to show up last year, but I think it's really showing up this year. He's impacting winning significantly. I think he's got elite role player potential. I don't know if people are excited about that. I am. I look at
especially on the contract, yeah,
and I look at somebody like Draymond Green as an elite role player, and in other contexts, you could call that a superstar. He's not. You're not going to hand him the ball and he's going to go to work and do a bunch of juke moves and get you 20 and 10 and 10 or something every night. But Jabari fills the cracks around superstars in a big way, and he's got great size. He's got the ability to shoot from outside. I thought it was a great showing from him tonight. I was happy to see it because he's been struggling a little bit from 3-point range the last while. For him to break out from 3 tonight was great.
And Steven Adams, I mentioned earlier, he didn't have 0 rebounds tonight like he did the other night. He had 12. So what a huge swing to go from 0 rebounds against the same team on Monday to 12 tonight. And Kevin, we talked about the shot making, and for all the trash talk, which is great. It's not that the Rockets didn't have it in the past. Dylan Brooks in particular would talk trash, but the trash talk, the vocal leadership hits a little bit different when you can back it up by scoring 30, which KD is much more capable of doing than Dylan Brooks. So I think just the intangibles stand out, but also the willingness to throw their body into harm's way. KD mentioned his post-game quote, what it stands out, extra juice, extra energy.
Yeah.
KD with 6 rebounds, Steven Adams with 12. That's your 2 vets who have a ton of mileage on their bodies. And, Steven's probably going to rest tomorrow in Sacramento because he's not playing both ends of back-to-backs at this point. So he left it all on the court tonight. 18 rebounds between them. And if you're not giving up the second chance opportunities, and if you're protecting the rim, that's why I really think so much of what's happened this month, some of it's been just absences. Şengün missed a couple of the games while sick. Steven Adams missed a couple of games on back-to-backs. Some of it's been just underperformances. We've talked about Şengün's issues. We've talked about Steven, the 0 rebounds, being an outlier. But I just think a lot of what we've talked about with the defense comes down to the rim protection not being what we're used to. And quite frankly, it's a clear outlier. Like, this is an Ime Udoka coach team. One reason why, to go back to the Reed Sheppard discussion briefly, that I'm inclined to put Reed on the floor, I will gamble on the side of trusting Ime Udoka's creativity on defense before I'd gamble on trusting Ime Udoka's ability to figure it out offensively without Reed Sheppard and also without Fred VanVleet. To me, without Fred, and given what Ime can do defensively, it's all the easier, at least in my opinion, to just trust that he'll be able to figure it out. And so I think that's the conundrum late in games, and I think they'll increasingly err on the side of Reed Sheppard based on what we've seen this week, especially against the really good competition. But then overall, it's like so many of these defensive concerns from Reed to Jabari to anyone else in the rotation. If you have Şengün and Steven available and playing at a higher level than they have for most of this month, and they should. I mean, we saw them do it in November when this was, they ended November ranked number 2 in the NBA in defense. I think it's pretty clear going into tonight, they were number 16 in defensive rating in December. That's an outlier. This is a good defensive team. Once the interior figures it out, and I think they will, it's inevitable, then so many other things are gonna fall in line. Like a lot of the things people picked on with Jabari on the perimeter, like I don't care how good your perimeter defense is, you're going to get blown by from time to time in today's NBA. Like, it's a dribble penetration league. Guys are quicker than ever. It's tougher to defend without fouling because of how the game's officiated. You need that rim protection. It wasn't always there, but you can see in the rebounding data tonight, they were much more spry. They were much more springy. KD this week has shown an increased willingness to, protect the rim as well. And so if you have that protection near the rim, then the guys like Reed and Jabari are going to hold up magically much better.
And a couple other notes just as we get ready to close here. One, we kind of, if everything pans out the way we hope, the Rockets would be 2 or 3 in the West. I mean, they're not there right now. I don't know what they are after this win, but they were 5th, I think, coming into this game. And Minnesota just got a big win over OKC, and they're hanging around at 6. I guess what I'm trying to get at is these two teams, Rockets and Nuggets, could face each other in the second round of the playoffs this year if it goes as we hope or expect. The good I thought was a good sign is both of these games, the Rockets got Jokic in foul trouble. They fouled him out in the first game, and then this one, and there was certainly that controversial one just before the half. You and I discussed this, that he wasn't really set. Jokic wasn't. Şengün did kind of barrel through him. They reviewed it, and it would have been Jokic's 4th foul just before the half, but they upheld it as a foul on Şengün instead. He basically was struggling. They didn't, in my opinion, officiate him like an MVP because he, like both times, had real foul trouble against this Rocket team. So hopefully that's a good sign if these two teams do face each other. And one other setup, Rockets play the Kings tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to do a show or not. I know Ben can't make it tomorrow. We may do it. It's going to be a late show. But I don't think the Rockets have won a second game of a back-to-back this year. This is the 3rd back-to-back, if I'm remembering correctly. And it is the Kings, the lowly Kings. They have really struggled this year. I'm assuming we'll see Adams out. I don't know if we'll see Tari back. I'm expecting no, because we've felt the last 2 or 3 games now that he was going to come back. That this is a big game in the sense that it's kind of a trap, very similar to the Pelicans, and it's the second game of a back-to-back, which you haven't won yet this year.
And also, to your point on the standings, there's also a world where I hope this doesn't apply to the Rockets. I hope they take off, and we mentioned the schedule getting weaker, starting with this game. You've got the rest of this month, the Kings, the Clippers, the Lakers, who are tough, but they won't have Austin Reeves in all likelihood, the Cavs, who are teetering. Then you've got, the Pacers, the Nets, the Mavs, the Suns, the Trailblazers twice. It's a pretty soft schedule for the next 10 to 12 games. And so hopefully the Rockets are able to establish themselves in that 2-3 range. But also, if there's a top 6 and there's the clear top 5 now, and let's say the Timberwolves join, there could be an incentive. I hope it's not the Rockets that are looking at this, but to drop to 6 so that you're on that, 2-3 line instead of on course to play Oklahoma City in round 2, which you would be if you're the 4-5. Like we saw Minnesota as the 6 last year, and they got to the Western Conference Finals by avoiding the OKC side of the bracket. So small thing to keep in mind. I hope that doesn't apply to the Rockets, but in the short term, like, this was the stabilizing win. They needed it. This proved that, nothing is just catastrophically off the rails. Like Ime Udoka, Kevin Durant's messages, they are getting through. And so now this is the point in which I know there are reasons for it, back-to-backs, but look, relative to the spreadsheet, they've lost games this month that they should have won in Utah, in Dallas, in New Orleans. These are the games, the Kings and the Clippers, you are better than these teams, even on night 2 of back-to-backs. Look, Reed Sheppard, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, Amin Thompson, they've got fresh legs. They're young. Let them run. Clint Capella didn't have to play tonight, I don't think. He should be fresh, replacing Steven as the backup center. Let them eat. Yeah. Trust your young guys. Play Capella a little bit more if you need it. That's why you signed a third-string veteran center, and get this win. Because I think tonight shows the upside is there. If you had any concerns about can they beat top-tier competition, I think that, we can dial that down a little bit at the moment. Now, the next thing is, can they bring their effort more consistently? That's what I'm looking for the next couple of games. Like, they've stabilized. They've showed the upside is still there. Now, can they get back to the consistency they had in November, to where, like we saw that road trip where they just ran through Toronto and Boston and they were just bludgeoning teams? Let's get back to that. Let's see them go and beat up on teams like the Kings and Clippers that when healthy, the Rockets should be able to beat by 10-plus points.
Yep, absolutely. And on that spreadsheet, Rockets, with the loss to the Pelicans, fell behind by 1 on their pace. And then tonight, win a game that I had down as a loss. So they're right back on pace on that spreadsheet. So 56-57 win pace, looking good. So huge win tonight. Rockets, lots of positive signs. Reed Sheppard being probably the biggest, in the sense of there's real potential here for a point guard, an engine. I like this, how I would probably describe it, or a primary. Had a terrific game, great shooting performance, and showed some real playmaking promise. That's been DuBose. I'm Dave Hardisty. Appreciate all of you guys watching, and we will be back soon. Thanks, everybody.